Comfortable Vel Satis and outrageous Avantime were left out of the market. Moreover, both primary and secondary, Vel Satis is still a piece goods, and at the time of writing, there were only 19 cars for sale on Avito. Let's take a look at what other difficulties can arise when choosing a car that was produced from 2001 to 2009. Despite their age, almost all copies on sale look very presentable, and in the reports of the owners there are rarely stories about corrosion problems. What's the secret? The fact that half of the outer panels are made of aluminum and half of the plastic. Aluminum here, in particular, the doors and hood, but the front fenders and the trunk lid are plastic, which not only saves weight, but also extends their life by completely eliminating corrosion. However, the same cannot be said about aluminum body parts. Damage to the paintwork leads to oxidation and destruction, even if these processes go slower and more imperceptibly. In addition, it is worth paying attention to the junctions of aluminum with steel. Here the destruction of the metal can proceed faster. Of course, the use of metal and plastic had no effect on the aging and wear of typical mechanisms. Power windows fail, the trunk lid open button turns sour and breaks, door stops click and creak, and the price and quality of new ones stimulate folk art, which has given rise to replaceable bushings made of Caprolon, fluoroplastic, copper, bronze, brass, and anything else. Door handles should also be checked for operability, both from the inside and outside. Failures to lock the opening by children and wear on the mechanisms will make you tinker and look for details. Of course, inside you need to evaluate the dryness of the floors in the cabin and trunk. Water flows into the cabin through door seals and non-factory windshields, as well as due to clogged hatch drains, if any. In the trunk, the pool in the spare wheel niche is organized due to leakage through the lamp niches and all the same seals. Along the way, inside you can admire the chic front seats with a braking back and a set of electrical adjustments and practical solutions like glove compartments and drawers under the rear sofa. It is not for nothing that not only family people, but also the presidents of France went to Vel Satis. Well, all the saddest things, as you might guess, are hidden from view in the niches and cavities of the body, as well as on the bottom. Sometimes it is enough to look into the arches to see the rotten fender mounts and rust-eaten surfaces that extend to the spars, inclusive. Thresholds, especially from the bottom, in the seam area, also need to be studied with passion, and you can find a lot of interesting things under the plastic lining. The condition of the bottom already largely depends on the owners. The price of cars has dropped to a minimum, so not all of them see regular anti-corrosive. Particular attention should traditionally be paid to the spars and attachment points of the subframes and suspension. As in the case of any other exclusive, a separate conversation concerns the availability and cost of body parts. Vel Satis in this regard is not the worst option. Even if the French sold only 60,000 cars instead of the planned 300, it is still twice as much as the circulation of the same Alfa Romeo Brera. In other words, there is at least some chance to find something at a showdown at reasonable prices without going broke on buying the original. Indeed, for most body parts, there are expectedly no substitutes. For example, the hood is at least 30,000, the front fender is from 15, and the plastic trunk lid costs almost 70,000. And this is not counting the rear window, which sometimes crumbles on its own. Without blows, such an opportunity will empty the wallet by almost 50,000 rubles more. A xenon headlight costs about 60,000, and a halogen headlight is half the price. At the same time, the original taillights are surprisingly inexpensive, 10,000 for each of the 4 sections, 2 on the wings, 2 on the trunk lid. In general, in the event of an accident, you will have to thoroughly delve into flea markets, and not only Russian ones. In the same Belarus there are more cars, and spare parts come across more often. Having received a platform from eSpace and Laguna, Vel Satis, and was produced with them at the factory in Saint-Deville, France, the premium hatchback partially shared the chassis with both. Ahead here is the usual McPherson strut, but behind it is a multi-link, and some of the levers in it are made of aluminum. However, unification does its job, spare parts are moderately expensive, and the range of non-original products helps additionally, and almost any owner of another related Frenchman is quite capable of maintaining Vel Satis. For example, even the front L-shaped lever costs only 6,000, and the rear links also fit into the assembly of 7 to 10,000, not counting individual silent blocks. The once scarce transverse rear arm with the floating silent block now also costs about 6,000. The shock absorbers here are simple, without air bellows and stiffness adjustments, so you can buy elements from KYB for 5,000 around. In addition, The suspension is maintainable and does not force you to buy the whole thing. The front ball joint regularly changes separately from the lever and costs a penny. Fortunately, it is unified, and the front wheel bearing can also be bought without a hub. There are, of course, expensive exceptions. A massive aluminum rear arm costs more than $50,000 and is unparalleled. But for him you can buy silent blocks, the original for a modest $6,000 and the non-original for $2.5. In general, when buying a suspension, you need to inspect with passion for the integrity of large and expensive rear levers, but otherwise the unification will save your pockets. The same goes for the brakes. The hatchback got full disc brakes from eSpace, simple, single piston with a floating caliper in a circle, but with discs with a diameter of 324 mm in front and 300 mm in the rear. Consumables are quite affordable. Front discs can be bought from $2,000 instead of $12,000 for the original. The rear ones, however, are combined in the French manner with wheel bearings, but here even the original costs $6,000, so the solution can be considered inconvenient only from a technical point of view. When inspecting the car, it is worth checking the operation of the then newfangled automatic parking brake, which itself dissolves the pads at the start. Here we add a check of the brake lines and hoses, as well as brake fluid. Power steering is also widely unified with other models, so you can buy a restored rack from Laguna for $15,000 to $20,000. Unless the cost of the power steering pump, depending on the motor, can be both ridiculous and biting, up to $25,000 to $30,000. The list of gearboxes will please those who are afraid of French cars because of the ubiquitous AL4. On the base machines, a manual gearbox was also offered, but the bulk were equipped with classic automatics. Moreover, from Eisen, the most common option is the 5-speed 55-50 SN, and the 6-speed TF80 SC was installed on diesel 3-liter cars after restyling. These automatic transmissions are familiar from the mass of other cars from Volvo, Opel, Ford, Cadillac, and so on. In general, they have long been mastered in repairs. Structurally, both boxes are quite successful, but they are extremely sensitive to the purity and temperature of the oil, and the aggressive operation of the torque converter lockup negatively affects both. As a result, the resource is highly dependent on driving style and maintenance. If you change the oil every 50 to 60,000 kilometers, take care of cooling and do not press the floor from a stop at every traffic light, the box will easily pass its 200,000 or more. On the cars of the racers, the resource may not reach even 150, but can you imagine a young active driver buying an elderly Vel Satis? However, taking into account the age of the machines, it is already worth talking about the timing of the last repair and the timely installation of an external radiator. By the way, a 6-speed gearbox is somewhat stronger, but it will also be more expensive to repair. If you are not satisfied with the richest equipment and a manual transmission, you can save a little. The clutch kit here fits into $10,000, and the release bearing is mechanical and inexpensive, so consumables are quite affordable. The main catch is a 2-mass flywheel, which will cost $40,000 to $50,000. For those who plan to drive a lot and for a long time, there are clutch kits with a single-mass flywheel. However, $40,000 to $50,000 will also have to be paid for the kit. One of the difficulties of buying Vel Satis is the choice of the optimal engine. The engine range is wide. It has 2 petrol and 3 diesel options with a volume of 2 to 3.5 liters, so the choice cannot be called poor. But, firstly, most engines have their own nuances, and secondly, the extremely scarce number of cars on sale further complicates the selection of a copy with the right engine in good condition. Let's briefly go over the motors to make a choice. Despite the fact that Vel Satis was officially sold with gasoline engines in our country, diesels are in the lead in the secondary market. 11 out of 19 cars on sale at the time of writing were equipped with them. And this, in general, is one of the difficulties of the search. Diesel cars, especially at this age, are already fully showing their whims. The runs are huge, and the engines are not ideal. A good choice can be considered a starting M9R for 2 liters. We are only familiar with it from Megane, Laguna, and Nissan Qashqai. However, there are almost no cars with this engine on sale. Besides, it is combined only with a manual gearbox and an unremarkable package, and in addition it is not powerful enough for a large hatchback with a claim to status. The most popular option is the 2.2-liter G9T, but it is already unpredictable. In addition to the old fuel equipment and supercharging, there is a tendency to crack the cylinder head and rotate the liners. For a diesel engine, the set is too big, so buying a car with such an engine should be fully equipped. The top-end 3-liter diesel V6 turned out to be not without sin. The Isuzu development motor can also upset not only failures of the high-pressure fuel pump, injectors, variable geometry turbine and EGR system, but also overheating, followed by breakdown of the cylinder head gasket and cracks in the blockhead. The problem was partially eliminated after the 2005 update, but if you definitely want to get 350 Nm of thrust and moderate consumption, you should be very careful in diagnosing the motor and have a reserve of money in case of repair. Against this background, gasoline engines seem to be just a stronghold of simplicity and reliability. The basic version is a 2-liter F4 RT, a supercharged fellow of the engine familiar to us from dozens of models of the Renault-Nissan concern. The engine is extremely simple, with a cast iron block and an aluminum cylinder head, conventional distributed injection and a cheap timing belt. Here, unlike atmospheric options, there are not even phase regulators, but hydraulic compensators are in place. And even supercharging is not capable of seriously upsetting. A restored turbine assembly can be bought for $30,000, and a cartridge for less than $10,000. Of course, at this age it is worth paying attention to leaks, the state of the intake, the crankcase ventilation system and catalyst. And you don't need to save on maintenance. It's better to change the timing belt every 60,000 and choose good oil. But all the same, by a combination of factors, this particular motor can be considered the simplest and cheapest to maintain. The older 3.5-liter V6, which was the Nissan VQ35DE, is also a great choice, with a reliable timing chain, distributed injection, and a resource of under 500,000 kilometers. If you do not miss the destruction of the catalysts, as well as fill in good oil and monitor the cooling system, the motor can be considered almost eternal by modern standards. But do not forget that the cars are already under 20 years old, so a run of 500,000 kilometers may not be a beautiful figure, but an imminent anniversary. And for those who want to get the most out of it, you need to consider the transport tax for 238 horsepower and fuel consumption of 16 to 20 liters per 100. Well, now, having briefly figured out what is good in Renault Vel Satis, you can draw up a portrait of the optimal instance. As we have already understood, when searching, you should become attached either to a rich configuration or to gasoline engines, depending on the budget and personal preferences. But the most logical option would be to search for a restyled car with a 2-liter gasoline engine in a decent configuration, something like this. A mileage of 200,000 and an accident-free history should definitely be checked, for example, with the help of Avtotika. But even if there are problems with the machine, it will be cheaper and easier to fix them in this case. But it is precisely the minimum investment in an age-old and inexpensive car that is what most buyers are waiting for. Moreover, for such modest money you can get a real French business class, richly equipped, unusual and practical.